Have you ever had a moment so perfect you wished you could freeze it in time? For Sophia Sterling, that moment was the soft glow of candles on her 35th birthday cake, surrounded by friends, in a home she designed, with a husband she adored. Life wasn't just good, it was flawless. But perfection is a fragile thing. What happens when the doorbell rings, and on the other side isn't a late-arriving guest, but a secret that's come to shatter everything? Stay with me as we unravel a story of betrayal that turns into a confession so shocking it rewrites an entire family's history, all while a camera was secretly streaming it to the world. The air in Sophia Sterling's home hummed with the gentle murmur of success. It was the sound of clinking champagne flutes, soft jazz spilling from hidden speakers, and the low, confident laughter of people who believed their futures were as secure as the stock market. Tonight, that sound was a symphony dedicated to her. It was her 35th birthday, and the party was a perfect reflection of the life she and her husband, Andrew, had meticulously built. Their home, a modern marvel of glass and white stone, nestled in the affluent suburb of Crestwood, was her own design. As a rising star in the architectural world, it was her masterpiece, a testament to her talent. Every clean line, every expansive window that framed the setting sun was a piece of her soul. She moved through the crowd, a vision in an emerald silk dress that matched the deep, steady green of her eyes. She smiled, accepted compliments on the house, on her dress, on the canapes. Andrew was never far from her side, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. To everyone here, Andrew Sterling was the complete package, devastatingly handsome, with a charming smile that could disarm anyone, and the heir to Sterling and Sons, a lucrative property development empire. He was the golden son, the perfect husband. "She's outdone herself again," she heard someone whisper as she passed. "They're the perfect couple." Sophia's smile tightened for just a fraction of a second. Perfection was a heavy crown to wear. It required constant polishing. It meant overlooking the late nights Andrew claimed were spent at the office, the faint, unfamiliar scent of perfume on his suit jacket that he'd blame on a client, the way his eyes sometimes seemed to look right through her. She'd told herself it was the pressure of his job, the weight of his family's legacy. She chose to believe in the perfection because the alternative was unthinkable. Her mother-in-law, Victoria Sterling, held court near the grand piano. A woman carved from ice and elegance, Victoria was the matriarch of the Sterling dynasty. Her approval was a currency Sophia had spent a decade earning. Tonight, even Victoria seemed pleased. She'd given Sophia a delicate diamond tennis bracelet, her slender, cool fingers fastening it around Sophia's wrist. "A woman of your stature deserves to be adorned, my dear," Victoria had said, her voice smooth but distant. It was the closest she ever came to a genuine compliment. Victoria's relationship with her own late husband, Arthur Sterling, had been notoriously cold, a business merger more than a marriage. Perhaps, Sophia thought, she simply didn't know how to show warmth. Andrew raised his glass for a toast. "To my brilliant wife, Sophia, the architect of my home, the architect of my happiness. 35 has never looked more beautiful. I love you." The room erupted in applause. Andrew leaned in and kissed her, a public performance of affection that felt both reassuring and slightly hollow. As she pulled back, she caught her reflection in the glass of the French doors. She saw the perfect wife, in the perfect home, with the perfect husband. A beautiful, gilded cage. Just as the caterers began to bring out the towering birthday cake, a confection of white chocolate and raspberries, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent chime that cut through the pleasant hum of the party. A few guests glanced towards the door. Andrew frowned slightly. "Were you expecting anyone else?" "No," Sophia said, a strange, prickling unease creeping up her spine. All their friends were here. Their housekeeper, Maria, hurried to the door. Sophia watched as she opened it, saw Maria's polite smile falter, replaced by a look of stunned confusion. A young woman stood on the threshold, silhouetted against the encroaching twilight. She was beautiful, with long, dark hair and a defiant set to her jaw. She wore a simple black dress, but it did little to conceal the gentle, unmistakable swell of her stomach. The woman's eyes scanned the room, bypassing the confused guests, and landed, with laser-like precision, on Andrew. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her lips. "Andrew," she called out, her voice clear and carrying over the now silent room. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your wife?" The symphony of success shattered into a million pieces. The gilded cage had just been blown wide open, and Sophia Sterling was standing right in the middle of the explosion. Time seemed to warp, slowing down as every head in the room swiveled in a synchronized, disbelieving arc. The jazz music, forgotten by the DJ, continued its cheerful, oblivious tune, a grotesque soundtrack to the demolition of Sophia's life. The young woman stepped inside, her heels clicking with unnerving confidence on the polished marble floor. She didn't look like a homewrecker from a soap opera. She looked like a girl you'd see at a coffee shop, young, pretty, and utterly convinced of her own righteousness. Andrew was frozen, his face a mask of pale, waxy horror. The champagne flute he held slipped from his nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor with a sound that made Sophia flinch. Champagne pooled around his expensive Italian shoes like a golden accusation. Who are you?" Sophia's voice was a whisper, barely audible, but in the tomb-like silence of the room, it echoed. The woman's gaze shifted to Sophia. There was no sympathy in her eyes, only a chilling sort of pity. "My name is Chloe, and I'm carrying Andrew's baby." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. It was a physical, visceral sound of shock. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face, a cold, dizzying rush that made her grip the edge of a nearby table to keep from collapsing. She looked at Andrew, desperately searching his face for a denial, for a laugh, for anything to signal that this was some kind of cruel, elaborate joke. But she found nothing. Only guilt. Blazing, undeniable guilt. "Andrew, tell her to leave," Sophia managed, her voice trembling with a rage that was beginning to eclipse the shock. Chloe laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "Oh, he can't do that. You see, he's been telling me for the last 9 months that he was going to leave you." She took another step forward, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. "He said the marriage was a sham, a business arrangement. He said you were cold, career-obsessed. He said he loved me." Each word was a hammer blow, systematically dismantling the foundation of Sophia's 10-year marriage. The friends who had been celebrating her moments before now stared with a mixture of horror and morbid curiosity. They were no longer guests. They were spectators at a public execution. "Get out of my house," Sophia said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "I think you mean our house," Chloe retorted, her eyes sweeping over the high ceilings and expensive art. "Or at least it will be. My son deserves to be raised in his father's home." Andrew finally found his voice, but it was a strangled, pathetic thing. "Chloe, this is not the time or the place." "When is the time, Andrew?" She shot back, her voice rising. "You keep putting it off. I'm 5 months pregnant. I'm done waiting in the shadows while you play the perfect husband to her. Everyone here deserves to know the truth. This man, this pillar of the community, is a liar and a cheat. To cement her claim, Chloe reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. With a few taps, she turned the screen towards the horrified crowd. It was a picture of her and Andrew laughing together on a boat, the sun glinting off the water. Andrew's arm was draped around her, his smile unguarded and genuinely happy in a way Sophia hadn't seen in years. It was followed by a screenshot of a text message, ostensibly from Andrew. "Just get through this stupid party, then I'm all yours, I promise. Love you." The evidence was irrefutable. The betrayal was absolute. Sophia's best friend, Sarah, rushed to her side, wrapping a protective arm around her. "Let's get you out of here, Sophia." But Sophia couldn't move. She was paralyzed, watching the life she knew burn to the ground. She looked past Andrew, past the intruder, to her mother-in-law. Victoria Sterling stood perfectly still, her expression unreadable. She wasn't looking at her distraught son or the humiliated wife. She was looking at Chloe, her eyes narrowed in a cold, analytical assessment, as if she were examining a hostile corporate takeover rather than a family catastrophe. There was no shock on her face, only a strange, unsettling calmness. The guests, sensing the party was irrevocably over, began to make their excuses, murmuring apologies as they scurried for the door, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere of betrayal. The whispers would be all over town by morning. The perfect couple was no more. Finally, only a few people remained: Sophia, Andrew, Chloe, Sarah, and Victoria. Sophia turned to Andrew, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. The pain was a physical thing, a shard of glass in her chest. 10 years, Andrew, she whispered, her voice breaking. Was any of it real? He couldn't meet her eyes. He just stared at the shattered glass on the floor. Sophia, I can explain. Explain what? She cried, the sound raw and wounded. Explain how you whispered you loved me this morning while you were planning your life with her. Explain that text message? Explain that baby? She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and walked, blindly, towards the sweeping staircase, each step an monumental effort. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to get away from the ashes of her perfect life. The days that followed were a blur of grey, featureless hours. Sophia had fled to Sarah's spare bedroom, a small, quiet space that felt like a sanctuary after the cavernous emptiness of her own home. She had taken nothing with her but the clothes on her back and the diamond bracelet from Victoria, which now felt like a shackle on her wrist. The house she had designed, the one she had poured her heart and soul into, was now a tainted space. Every corner held a memory now poisoned by Andrew's betrayal. The breakfast nook where they'd planned a trip to Italy, the living room where they'd celebrated her first major commission, the bedroom they had shared. It was all contaminated territory. Andrew, of course, had tried to reach her. A relentless barrage of calls, texts, and emails filled her phone. Sophia read the first few before a wave of nausea forced her to stop. Sophia, please talk to me. It wasn't what it looked like. She trapped me. This is all a misunderstanding. I love you. Only you. We can fix this. Don't throw away 10 years. They were the pathetic, textbook excuses of a guilty man. Each message was a fresh twist of the knife. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he got caught. He wasn't trying to save their marriage. He was trying to save his reputation. She blocked his number and deleted his emails without reading them. The silence was better than the lies. Sarah was a rock, fielding calls from concerned friends and fielding Sophia from the world. She brought her tea, sat with her in silence, and let her cry until she was exhausted. What do I do now? Sophia asked one afternoon, staring blankly at the rain streaking down the window pane. My whole life. It was a lie. No, Sarah said firmly, sitting beside her. Your career is not a lie. Your talent is not a lie. The friendships you have are not a lie. He was the lie, Sophia, and you're better off without him. But it didn't feel that way. It felt as if a vital part of her had been amputated without anesthesia. She had built her identity around being Mrs. Sterling, the wife of a powerful man, one half of a perfect couple. Who was she without him? The question terrified her. The gossip, she knew, was rampant. She could only imagine the phone calls, the whispers at the country club, the pitying looks. Did you hear about the Sterlings? At her own birthday party, no less. So tragic. Her humiliation was now public entertainment. 1 week after the party, an unexpected call came through. The caller ID read, Victoria Sterling. Sophia's first instinct was to ignore it. She couldn't face her mother-in-law. She couldn't bear to hear Victoria's disappointment, or worse, her attempts to defend her precious son. But something made her answer. Hello, Victoria. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Sophia. Victoria's tone was as crisp and cool as ever. There was no preamble, no awkward apology for Andrew's behavior. I need to see you. Can you meet me for tea tomorrow? The Willow Creek Tea Room at 2 o'clock. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. Sophia was about to refuse when Victoria spoke again, her voice lowering slightly. This is not about defending Andrew. I assure you, my son's infidelity is the least of my concerns right now. This is about the future of the Sterling family. And whether you know it or not, you are still a part of that. There are things you do not understand, Sophia. Things that were set in motion long before you ever met my son. The words were cryptic, chilling. What could be more important than the public implosion of her son's marriage and an illegitimate grandchild on the way? What did she mean? The least of my concerns. Against her better judgment, a flicker of curiosity ignited within her. Victoria had been so strangely composed at the party, so unnaturally calm. It wasn't the reaction of a mother whose son had just been exposed. It was the reaction of a chess player watching her opponent make a predictable, foolish move. What things? Sophia asked, her voice cautious. Not on the phone, Victoria said firmly. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Please, Sophia. I wouldn't ask if it weren't a matter of the utmost importance. The use of the word please was so uncharacteristic for Victoria that it shocked Sophia more than anything else. In 10 years, she had never heard her mother-in-law say it. All right, Sophia heard herself say. I'll be there. After she hung up, she stared at her phone, a deep sense of foreboding settling over her. Victoria Sterling was not a woman who engaged in idle drama. She was a woman who dealt in power and secrets, and Sophia had the unnerving feeling that the carefully polished stones of the Sterling family facade were about to be overturned, revealing something far older and darker than a simple affair. The Willow Creek Tea Room was a place of quiet, old-world elegance. It was all hushed tones, polished silver, and the delicate scent of bergamot and baked scones. It was Victoria's territory. Sophia felt out of place in her simple grey sweater and trousers, feeling as though the misery of the past week was a shabby coat she couldn't take off. Victoria was already seated at a secluded corner table, a single cup of Earl Grey before her. She looked as immaculate as ever in a cream-coloured Chanel suit, not a single silver hair out of place. She watched Sophia approach, her dark eyes giving nothing away. "Thank you for coming, Sophia," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. Sophia sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I'm not sure why I'm here, Victoria. If this is about convincing me to take Andrew back. It's not, Victoria cut her off, her voice sharp. Let me be perfectly clear. What Andrew did was a disgrace. It was weak, common, and beneath the Sterling name. He has disappointed me more than you can possibly imagine. The word surprised Sophia. She had expected excuses, pleas for family unity, not outright condemnation. A waitress appeared, and Sophia numbly ordered a chamomile tea. When they were alone again, Victoria leaned forward slightly, her voice low and conspiratorial. Sophia, our family, the Sterling Empire, was not built on love matches. It was built on strategy, strength, and the meticulous maintenance of our reputation. My marriage to Arthur was one such arrangement. He was a brilliant but deeply cruel man. He controlled everything and everyone in his orbit, including me. This was a shocking admission. Victoria never spoke of her late husband in anything but reverent, respectful tones. He was difficult, Sophia offered cautiously. Victoria let out a dry, mirthless laugh. Difficult. Arthur was a tyrant who wore a bespoke suit. He saw people as assets or liabilities. There was no in-between. I stayed for one reason, and one reason only. Andrew. I was determined that my son would not be the man his father was. I wanted him to have a life of his own, a marriage based on partnership, not possession. That's why I was so pleased when he chose you. You are strong, intelligent, independent. You were not a liability. You were his greatest asset. She took a slow sip of her tea, her eyes fixed on Sophia. To see him throw that away for a cheap, foolish affair, it is not just a betrayal of you. It is a betrayal of the 40 years I spent enduring his father. Sophia didn't know what to say. She was seeing a side of her mother-in-law she never knew existed, a woman who had been trapped, who had sacrificed, who was now watching her life's work crumble. That girl, Chloe, Victoria continued, her voice hardening. I did not believe her appearance was a coincidence. The timing was too perfect, the execution too theatrical. So I had her investigated. You what? I have people, Sophia. People who are very good at finding information. Chloe is not some lovesick girl who was swept off her feet. She is a cocktail waitress with a history of targeting wealthy, married men. But this is different. 2 months ago, a large anonymous deposit was made into her bank account. A deposit far too large to be a simple gift from my son. Sophia stared at her, horrified. You think someone paid her to do this? I am certain of it, Victoria stated. Someone wants to destroy the Sterling family. They used my son's weakness as the key to unlock the door. By creating a public scandal and introducing a potential heir, they could trigger clauses in the family trust, challenge Andrew's leadership at the company, and send our stock into a free fall. This was never about love. It was a corporate attack disguised as a personal drama. The scale of the deception was staggering. It was far bigger and more sinister than a simple affair. Who? Sophia whispered. Who would do that? I have my suspicions, Victoria said, her lips thinning into a hard line. A disgruntled cousin, a business rival. Arthur made many enemies. But suspicion is not proof, which is why I need your help. My help? What can I possibly do? Here it was, the true purpose of this meeting. Victoria laid out her plan with the cool precision of a general planning a battle campaign. I am arranging a family meeting at my house in 2 days. Andrew will be there. I will ensure Chloe is there as well. I want you to be there too. Absolutely not, Sophia said, standing up. I will not be in the same room as them. I will not be a part of your family games, Victoria. Sit down, Sophia, Victoria commanded, her voice like steel. Sophia, to her own surprise, found herself obeying. This is not a game. This is about taking back control. I have a way to expose this entire conspiracy, to neutralize Chloe, and to force Andrew to confront the consequences of his actions in a way he never has before. But it will only work if you are there. I need you to be the wronged party, the victim. Your presence gives the entire event its moral authority. And what do you get out of it? Sophia asked, her eyes narrowed. You save the company, the family name. Yes, Victoria admitted without hesitation. But I also get to free myself from the legacy of Arthur Sterling once and for all. And I want to give you the truth. All of it. After that, what you choose to do, whether you divorce Andrew, take him for every penny he has, or never speak to any of us again, will be your decision, made with all the facts. I owe you that. She reached across the table and, for the first time ever, placed her cool hand over Sophia's. I have one more thing to ask of you. It will seem strange, but you must trust me. During this meeting, I will be setting up a camera. It will be live streaming to a private, invitation-only group. It's for insurance. No one will know but you and me. Can you trust me, Sophia? Just this once? A live stream? The idea was bizarre, theatrical. What could Victoria possibly be planning that needed to be broadcast? Sophia's mind reeled. This was a descent into a world of corporate espionage and family secrets she had never known existed. Her personal heartbreak was just a pawn in a much larger, more dangerous game. She looked into Victoria's eyes and saw a flicker of something she had never seen before. Desperation. The untouchable matriarch was on the edge of a precipice. Perhaps it was the desire for answers, or perhaps it was a dark, unbidden need to see Chloe and Andrew face a reckoning they couldn't escape. Whatever it was, Sophia made a decision. Fine, she said, pulling her hand away. I'll be there. But I'm not doing it for Andrew, or for the Sterling name. I'm doing it for me. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched Victoria's lips. That's all I ask. Victoria's home was nothing like the modern, airy space Sophia had built. It was an old-world mansion, a fortress of dark wood, heavy velvet drapes, and ancestral portraits whose eyes seemed to follow you down the long, echoing halls. It was a house that kept its secrets well. Sophia arrived exactly on time, her heart a cold, heavy knot in her stomach. She had chosen her armor carefully, a sharply tailored black pantsuit that projected an aura of professionalism and emotional distance she did not feel. Sarah had tried to talk her out of it, calling it a suicide mission, but Sophia's resolve was firm. She needed to see this through to the end. A grim-faced butler led her to the library. The room was just as imposing as the rest of the house, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked as if they hadn't been touched in a century. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. They were all there, arranged like pieces on a chessboard. Andrew stood by the fireplace, his face haggard and pale. He looked as though he hadn't slept in days. When he saw Sophia, he took a step towards her, his mouth opening as if to speak, but she gave him a look so frigid it stopped him in his tracks. Chloe was seated in a wing-back chair, the picture of smug confidence. She had dressed for the part of the grieving but determined mother-to-be, wearing a soft, flowing maternity dress. She looked at Sophia with undisguised triumph, and in the center of it all, seated behind a massive mahogany desk, was Victoria. She was the queen, surveying her board. Beside her, on the corner of the desk, sat a laptop, its screen angled away from the others. Sophia noticed the small green light of the webcam was on. The live stream had begun. A shiver ran down her spine. Who was watching this bizarre theatre unfold? "Thank you all for coming," Victoria began, her voice cutting through the thick, tense silence. "I believe it's time we put an end to this unfortunate situation with clarity and finality." She looked directly at Chloe. "Miss Dubois, you have made some very serious claims. You have asserted that you are carrying my son's child and that he has promised to build a life with you." "They're not claims, they're facts," Chloe said, her voice full of saccharine sincerity. "I love Andrew, and he loves me. We didn't want to hurt anyone, but we can't deny our feelings or the fact that we have a child on the way." Andrew winced, but said nothing. He looked utterly lost, a puppet whose strings had been cut. "I see," Victoria said, her tone icy. "And what is it you are hoping to achieve today? What is your desired outcome?" Chloe leaned forward, her performance reaching its peak. "I don't want to be unreasonable. I just want Andrew to do the right thing, to acknowledge our son, to provide for him. I want a home for us, and his rightful place in the Sterling family. I'm willing to be discreet for a generous settlement." There it was, the demand, the end game. Sophia felt a surge of white-hot anger. To see her marriage, her life, reduced to a financial negotiation was a profound insult. She remained silent, remembering Victoria's instructions. She was here to be a witness, not a participant. "A settlement," Victoria repeated, tasting the word as if it were poison. She turned her cold gaze on her son. "Andrew, do you have anything to say to this? Do you love this woman? Did you promise to leave your wife for her?" Andrew's eyes darted between the three women, his formidable mother, his betrayed wife, and his pregnant mistress. He was trapped, and he knew it. "Mom, it's complicated," he stammered. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Chloe, I never said I would leave Sophia. I was confused." "Confused?" Chloe shrieked, her mask of civility slipping. "You liar! You told me you loved me. You told me she meant nothing to you. You sent me that text from her birthday party." The argument devolved into a sordid, ugly exchange. Chloe accusing, Andrew denying, his lies becoming more tangled and pathetic with every sentence. Sophia watched it all with a strange sense of detachment. The pain was still there, a dull, constant ache, but it was now overlaid with a profound sense of disgust. This was the man she had loved, this weak, cowardly stranger. Throughout the entire ugly spectacle, Victoria remained perfectly still. She let them argue, let the accusations fly, let the whole sordid mess spill out onto the Persian rug. She was allowing them to dig their own graves. Finally, when Chloe was breathless and Andrew was a sweating, stammering mess, Victoria held up a single manicured hand. The room instantly fell silent. "Enough," she said, her voice quiet, but ringing with absolute authority. She turned the laptop on her desk so that its screen was visible to everyone. It showed a simple video conferencing grid, but the squares weren't empty. They were filled with the faces of the Sterling family's most influential board members, lawyers, and key relatives from across the country. Their expressions were grim and horrified. Chloe's face went white. Andrew looked as if he was going to be physically sick. "As you can see," Victoria said calmly, "the board of Sterling and Sons, along with our family council, has been present for this entire conversation. I felt it was important for them to have a full and transparent understanding of the situation threatening the stability of our company." She then turned her attention back to the desk, clicking a mouse. A new window popped up on the screen, showing bank statements. And this This is a record of the anonymous payment of $250,000 into your account, Miss Dubois, traced back to an offshore shell corporation owned by the Cromwell Group, our biggest competitor." Chloe stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The color had completely drained from her face. She was exposed. The trap had been sprung. But Victoria wasn't finished. She wasn't looking at Chloe anymore. Her gaze was fixed, with a deep and unsettling sadness, on her son. "The truth is," Victoria said, her voice suddenly heavy with a sorrow that seemed ancient, "this entire charade is based on a lie. But the lie is not the one you think. The lie is much, much older." She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Andrew, you are worried about Chloe's son having a rightful claim to the Sterling family? He has as much of a claim as you do, which is to say, none at all, because Arthur Sterling was not your father." The silence that followed Victoria's declaration was absolute. It was a silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped spinning on its axis. The crackling of the fire in the hearth was the only sound, a lonely witness to the detonation of a secret kept for over 35 years. Andrew stared at his mother, his face a canvas of utter bewilderment. He shook his head slowly, a choked, disbelieving laugh escaping his lips. "What? What are you talking about? Mom, that's not funny. Tell them it's not true." Chloe was forgotten. The live stream was forgotten. The corporate espionage was forgotten. All that existed in that room was the chasm that had just opened between mother and son. Victoria's expression was one of profound, weary sadness. The iron mask of the matriarch had fallen away, revealing a woman Sophia had never seen before. A woman who was exhausted from carrying a burden for a lifetime. "I wish it weren't true, Andrew. God, I have wished that every single day of your life," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "But it is." She began to speak, not just to Andrew, but to the room, to the silent, watching faces on the computer screen, and perhaps to herself. Her voice was low and steady, a confessional tone that demanded silence. "Before I was Victoria Sterling, I was Victoria Davenport. My family was wealthy, but your grandfather, Arthur, came from old established power. To my parents, the marriage was the ultimate merger. They saw it as a transaction, and I was the asset being traded. But I was in love with someone else." She looked away, her eyes focused on a distant memory. "His name was Davis. He was an artist. He had nothing to his name but a brilliant talent and a heart that saw me, not my family's fortune. We were going to run away together. But my parents found out. They threatened me. They threatened to ruin him. They forced me to end it. They pushed me into Arthur's arms." Sophia watched, mesmerized. This was the story behind the cold, distant woman she thought she knew. A story of lost love and a gilded cage far more terrible than her own. "The week before the wedding," Victoria continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, "I met with Davis one last time to say goodbye. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. We both knew it was the end. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't realize until 2 months later, was that our goodbye had left me with a part of him." She looked directly at Andrew, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You, Andrew. You are Davis's son." Andrew stumbled backward, collapsing into a chair as if his legs could no longer support him. No, it's not possible. My father. Arthur. Arthur suspected," Victoria said, her voice hardening again as she mentioned her husband's name. "He never knew for certain, but the suspicion was enough for him. It became his weapon. He used it to control me, to isolate me. He agreed to raise you as his own, to give you the Sterling name, on one condition, that I would be his perfect, obedient wife, forever in his debt. He never loved you, Andrew. He saw you as my failure, my permanent sin. The cruelty he showed you, the impossible standards he set for you. It was his way of punishing me, through you. Suddenly, Andrew's entire life was reframed. His desperate need for his father's approval, Arthur's cold and constant criticism, the feeling that he could never quite measure up, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. He wasn't a disappointing son. He was a hated symbol of his mother's one act of defiance. He was the son of a ghost. Sophia felt an unexpected pang of pity for this man who had betrayed her so deeply. His entire identity, the heir, the golden boy, the Sterling scion, was a complete and utter fabrication. The foundation of his life was a lie told to protect his mother and weaponized by the man he called his father. Victoria then turned her attention back to the stunned face of Chloe on the screen. So you see, Miss Dubois, your scheme was flawed from the very beginning. You came here threatening to expose a secret heir to the Sterling fortune. But the man you had an affair with was never the true heir in the first place. Your child has no claim. You have no leverage. She closed the laptop with a soft, final click, severing the connection to the horrified onlookers. The private family drama was over. The public confession was complete. Chloe stared, her mouth agape, the color rushing back to her face in a wave of panicked fury. Her plan, her payday, her entire future had just evaporated. She had been played by a master. You're lying, she stammered, scrambling for purchase. This is just some crazy story to get out of paying me. Believe what you wish, Victoria said, rising from her chair. She was no longer just the matriarch. She was a woman unshackled. A DNA test will be arranged for Andrew. The results will be made public to the board. The truth will come out. Now, I suggest you leave my home. The butler will show you out. Chloe looked from Victoria's implacable face to Andrew's broken form, and finally to Sophia's stunned silence. There was no one on her side. No angle left to play. Her gamble had failed in the most spectacular way imaginable. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and fled the room, her hurried footsteps echoing her defeat in the grand, silent hall. The library was still again. Andrew sat motionless, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He was a king who had just learned his castle was made of sand. Victoria walked over to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens her husband had loved, but she had always hated. She had just set fire to her own life and to her son's to finally escape the prison Arthur Sterling had built around her. And Sophia stood in the middle of the wreckage, no longer just a wronged wife. She was the witness to a tragedy far deeper and more complex than she could ever have imagined. The affair was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was the Sterling family itself, built on a foundation of secrets, cruelty, and lies. And the cure had been a truth so devastating it had shattered them all. In the heavy silence that followed Chloe's departure, the only sound was Andrew's ragged breathing. He wasn't a villain anymore. He was just a broken man, stripped of his name, his history, and his pride. The carefully constructed edifice of Andrew Sterling had been reduced to rubble. Sophia watched him, and the anger she had clung to for weeks began to feel pointless. It was like being furious at a puppet for the actions of its puppeteer. His betrayal was real, his actions unforgivable, but they were born from a lifetime of seeking approval from a man who was incapable of giving it, a man who wasn't even his father. He had sought validation in his career, in his social standing, and in the arms of other women, because he had never felt truly worthy. It didn't excuse what he did. But for the first time, Sophia understood it. Victoria turned from the window. The immense strain of her confession was visible now in the faint tremors of her hands and the deep, weary lines around her eyes. She looked at Andrew, not with pity, but with a complex mix of sorrow and resolve. "The board has been informed," she said, her voice softer now. "They will call an emergency meeting. Your position as CEO will be untenable for the time being." She paused. "I have already begun the legal process to have you formally recognized as my son and my sole heir. The Sterling name may have been a lie, but my fortune is very real. You will not be left with nothing." It was a practical, logistical statement, but it was also an act of love. A mother cleaning up the debris after a necessary demolition. Andrew looked up, his eyes red and lost. "Who was he?" he whispered. "My real father, Davis. He was a good man," Victoria said quietly. "He passed away from cancer 10 years ago. I followed his career from a distance. He became quite well known. He married, had a daughter. I am told he was very happy." The finality of that statement hung in the air. There would be no reunion, no chance for Andrew to meet the man whose blood ran in his veins. He was, and would always be, an orphan to his own history. Finally, Sophia knew it was time for her to leave. This was a private grief, a family reckoning that no longer included her. She turned to go, but Victoria's voice stopped her. "Sophia." Sophia faced her. The two women looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. They were both survivors of the Sterling legacy, in their own ways. "Thank you," Sophia said simply. It felt like an inadequate phrase for the cataclysmic truth she had just witnessed, but it was all she had. "I didn't do it for you, or even for Andrew," Victoria replied, her honesty unwavering. "I did it for me. I have lived in Arthur's shadow for 40 years. I have choked on this secret for 35. I refused to let his ghost and some opportunistic little girl be the ones to finally burn this house down. I chose to light the match myself." She walked over to Sophia, her gaze direct. "What you do now is your choice. You have every right to divorce him. In fact, I would advise it. You deserve a life that is not built on the dust of a demolished house. Start over. Build something new. It's what you're good at." In that moment, Sophia felt a profound and unexpected respect for her mother-in-law. Victoria was not just a cold matriarch. She was a woman of incredible, terrifying strength who had just reclaimed her own life, no matter the cost. Sophia nodded, and without a backward glance at the weeping man in the chair, she walked out of the library and out of the imposing Sterling mansion for the last time. The drive back to Sarah's apartment felt surreal. The world outside was the same. Cars driving, people walking their dogs. But her own world had been fundamentally altered. She didn't know what the future held. The divorce was inevitable. Andrew had to embark on a journey to figure out who he was without the Sterling name, without his father's ghost haunting him. Maybe one day he would become a man she could respect again, but she knew he could never again be a man she could love. The trust was not just broken, it had been built on a foundation that never existed. Her own future, however, felt clear. The weight of maintaining the perfect life was gone. The pressure to live up to the Sterling name was gone. All that was left was her, Sophia, the architect. She thought of Victoria's final words, "Build something new." And for the first time in weeks, Sophia Sterling smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. It was the smile of a woman who had just been handed a blank blueprint. The demolition was over. It was time to start designing. The 3 weeks that followed the confession were strangely quiet. The world, which had tilted so violently on its axis, had settled into a new, unfamiliar alignment. For Sophia, the silence was a balm. She had moved out of Sarah's guest room and into a minimalist, sun-drenched loft in the city's arts district. It was a space of clean lines, polished concrete floors, and a single, massive, floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the sprawling, energetic pulse of downtown. It was the antithesis of the Sterling mansion, a space that held no secrets, no ghosts, only potential. She had spent her days doing the one thing that had always centered her. She designed. With charcoal pencils and vast sheets of architectural paper spread across a simple drafting table, she drew. She wasn't designing homes for the wealthy elite. She was sketching concepts for a new public library, a women's shelter, a community arts center. She was pouring her pain, her confusion, and her burgeoning sense of freedom into structures meant to serve, to shelter, to inspire. It was a form of therapy, a way of reclaiming her identity, not as a Sterling, but as a creator. The public fallout, however, had been anything but quiet. The business world was a hornet's nest of speculation. It started with a terse press release from Sterling & Sons announcing Andrew Sterling was taking an indefinite leave of absence for personal reasons. This was followed by financial news reports detailing a sudden, dramatic shake-up on the board. Victoria Sterling, once a silent power, had emerged from the shadows. Financial columnists wrote lengthy pieces analyzing her brilliant, ruthless maneuver. She hadn't just saved the company from a hostile takeover by the Cromwell Group. She had consolidated her power, purged the board of anyone whose loyalty was questionable, and stabilized the stock after an initial panic. She had burned down the patriarchy of her late husband and rebuilt the empire in her own image. Sophia's lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Catherine, had handled the divorce proceedings with quiet efficiency. As Victoria had predicted, there was no fight. Andrew's legal team sent a single, brief response. He agreed to all of Sophia's terms. He would sign whatever she put in front of him. There was no argument over the house she had designed, the assets they had accumulated, or the future of their shared life. It was a surrender. "He's not asking for anything," Catherine had told her over the phone, a note of surprise in her voice. "He's letting you write the entire settlement. In my 20 years of practice, I've never seen anything like it from a family this wealthy." But Sophia understood. What could he possibly ask for? Their shared life had been based on a lie he hadn't even known he was living. She instructed Catherine to draft an agreement that was fair, not punitive. She would take her share of their marital assets and full ownership of the house, her creation. She wanted nothing more. She had no desire to be funded by the Sterling legacy. She was determined to be the architect of her own fortune. One crisp autumn afternoon, a text message lit up her phone. The number was unknown, but the message was unmistakable. "Sophia, it's Andrew. I know I have no right to ask, but would you meet me? Just once, to talk. There's a small park on Ellison Avenue, tomorrow at noon. If you're not there, I'll understand." Her first instinct was to delete it. What was there left to say? But a deeper, quieter part of her knew this was a necessary final step. She couldn't begin building her new life until the last of the old debris was cleared away. The next day, she found him sitting on a solitary bench overlooking a small duck pond. The change in him was startling. Gone was the perfectly tailored suit, the confident posture, the aura of inherited power. He wore a simple grey Henley and jeans, and he looked smaller, more human. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights, but there was a stillness in him she hadn't seen before. The frantic, desperate energy was gone. He stood as she approached. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice quiet. "Andrew," she replied, her tone neutral. She remained standing. "I don't want to make excuses," he began, looking not at her, but at the water. "There are no excuses for what I did to you. The lies, the affair, it was cowardly and cruel, and you deserved none of it. I was a weak man, Sophia, hiding inside a powerful name. I spent my whole life trying to earn the love of a man who, it turns out, despised me from the moment I was born. When I couldn't get it from him, I looked for it everywhere else. From you, from my mother, from others. It was a hunger that could never be filled." He finally met her eyes, and she saw a flicker of the man she had once loved, buried beneath layers of pain and regret. "When my mother told the truth, it was like the world ended. But after a few days, I realized it wasn't the end. It was a beginning. I don't know who I am without the sterling name. And that's terrifying. But it's also freeing. I'm sorry, Sophia. I am so deeply, profoundly sorry for breaking our vows and for destroying the beautiful life you built for us." It was the apology she had needed to hear, not at her birthday party, but now. It was honest, stripped of ego, and raw. "What will you do?" she asked, her voice softening. "I'm leaving Crestwood," he said. "My mother has arranged things. A trust in my biological father's name, Davis Alistair. I'm going to travel for a while, maybe try to find his daughter, my half-sister. I need to figure out who Andrew Alistair is." He took a breath. "As for Chloe, the baby is mine. A paternity test confirmed it. My mother's lawyers have created a trust for him. He will be provided for, always. But I will not have a relationship with her. That part of my life is over. I have to be a father now, and I can't do it while repeating my own history of lies." Sophia nodded slowly, a sense of finality washing over her. This was the end. Not a fiery, dramatic end, but a quiet, somber one. The closing of a book. "I hope you find him, Andrew," she said, and she meant it. "I hope you find yourself." She turned and walked away, not looking back. She didn't need to. The echo of the falling walls was finally fading, and ahead of her there was only the clean, quiet space of a future waiting to be designed. That night, Sophia didn't just lose a husband. She witnessed the implosion of a dynasty, built on a secret a mother kept for 35 years. It's a stark reminder that the families that seem the most perfect on the outside are often the ones hiding the deepest cracks. Sophia's story isn't just about the pain of betrayal, but about the incredible strength it takes to walk away from the rubble and build a new life from scratch, on your own terms. What would you have done in her shoes? Could you ever find pity for a man like Andrew after his world was shattered? If this story of secrets, lies, and ultimate liberation resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who appreciates a story that's more than what it seems on the surface. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next real-life drama. Thank you for listening.